Hey cats, EDDBUD here. A longer test of the ALPHAFLY Next Percent version 2 for you today, plus some bonus comparisons against the original V1. As Delia Smith used to say, let's be having you. Thanks for tuning in, people. It is always appreciated. If you've only just found the channel and you haven't done so yet, click that subscribe button and also click the bell below for notifications while I launch the new videos for you. Give this video a thumbs up like and also share it with your running buddies. Danke schön. The ALPHAFLY Next Percent 2 on the test blocks on a longer run today. 10 miles or 16 kilometer effort at 7 minutes 53 per mile average pace. There's some 18-degree temperatures out there today. It was actually pretty humid too. Some quite strong summer winds as well. I think it's around about 15 miles an hour south to southwesterly. Bit of a sweat fest, and I've got to be honest, Chinese food and beer does not make for the best running nutrition. So just make note of that in case you hadn't worked it out already. I did mix it up a little bit halfway through with some half-mile reps below my marathon goal pace. If I actually ever get around to actually booking a marathon up, I should get to it and get that done. Hitting about 7 to 7 minutes 10 seconds per mile on those reps, and then some easier pace recoveries in between. Heart rate was certainly lower than it actually felt across the run. It did feel like quite a hard effort out there today. I think it was more the conditions really rather than myself. Average there of about 136 beats per minute over the 10 miles. Bit of a different route on the latter part of today's longer run, just to mix things up a little bit, I suppose. So how did this mammoth of midsole actually get on over the longer run? Undoubtedly, this version of the ALPHAFLY does benefit from having some of that ZoomX foam underneath the AirPods. That wasn't there on the V1. It appears the distribution of the foams is a little bit different as well. The more and more I've run in the shoe, the more and more it feels slightly different. The distribution of that foam is altered a little bit, and there's perhaps a millimetre or two less rubber on the V2 underfoot. I'm measuring about 5 millimeters on the V1 and about 2 millimeters on the V2. Thus we're gaining a couple of millimeters underfoot in the forefoot area, which is helping to provide that slightly more aggressive drop. On the session today, I can't say that I really noticed the weight difference between the two shoes. There's about 266 grams or 9.3 ounces in the first version of the ALPHAFLY, and about 277 grams or 9.8 ounces in the version 2. So you've got about a 10 gram difference there. Is it noticeable? Not really. Would this be the case though after 20 miles? I think after 20 miles, any shoe's going to feel a little bit more like a block of concrete. Even the most nimble shoes there are going to be left wanting a little bit, aren't they? Who knows? Some people train for months and months, years sometimes, to run a marathon, and then when they get to about 20 miles, they really just about had enough. But in terms of comfort, I think this few to match the ALPHAFLY Next Percent 2. Certainly in terms of the upper and the midsole that we've got here in the shoe. I think part of the problem that we've got with these very high stacked shoes is the fact they've got that very squashy midsole material, and at times that can nullify the actual midsole heel to toe drop that we see. A few millimeters change here between the V1 and the V2 ALPHAFLY, I think actually is a bit of a drop in the ocean. It's kind of irrelevant to all but the most seasoned shoe heads. I think the big improvement that I found today though on my run is in the outsole of the shoe. Ooh, look at that one. I think that this version of the ALPHAFLY is a little bit more suited to road and pavement use than the previous one. Let's not forget that Kip and the gang that were probably testing these out were running on dirt roads most of the time. I have to be honest, running on some light trails or some dirt areas, and the V1 actually is much better. I feel like you get some real grip there on toe off. The ridges there are gone now though. We've got this more waffle-like outsole on the V2, and I think it's better suited to tarmac and pavement use. So perhaps it's been altered a little bit for some of the Western world. One great thing about that ridged outsole on the V1 was that there was nowhere for debris and rocks to get stuck in. There's nowhere to hide on this one. Whereas with the holes in this one, you know that it's just a matter of time before something penetrates through and gets stuck in the ZoomX. Where it's exposed there, you just know that there's going to be some sort of sharp object you're going to step on, and it's going to go straight through and perhaps go into the AirPod. That would be terrible. Probably a little less likelihood of that happening on this very durable rubber that we had here. I am finding the V2 better across a range of paces. That was certainly today's run. I really did run some much easier pace stuff and some faster efforts, and the AirPod feel is far more forgiving here. It doesn't feel quite as aggressive underfoot. My measurements suggest that the AirPods are positioned in exactly the same places between the V1 and the V2. I don't think they've been changed at all. Now, the UK size 11 that I've got here is coming up slightly shorter than the V1 in terms of length. It's only 0.5 of a centimetre, but to a runner, that's like a mile. So it's about 29.5 centimeters of length here in the ALPHAFLY V2, and in both pairs of my V1 I'm measuring 30 centimeters spot on. I don't think that's been mentioned anywhere else. I can't recall any other reviewers talking about the length of the shoe. It does seem a little bit shorter than the first one. Measured both toe box width and also the width in the arch, and they're absolutely the same. So if anyone's going to tell you that there's slightly more width there in the V2, I just don't see it. Absolutely the same width across where the AirPods are and also in the arch area of the shoe. Just be ready for the extra bit of insole you get that covers up that arch. The heel counter is much longer in the ALPHAFLY version 2. Comes around to just around the end of the Zoom X printing on the midsole. I think that's probably another nod to stability here, trying to actually improve the lockdown of the shoe around the back of the foot and on top of the foot. Another oddity that I've noticed about this shoe versus the version 1 is the way that that outsole rubber kind of loops up and back around the front of the shoe. Doesn't do that anywhere near as much on the ALPHAFLY version 1. Maybe that is making the shoe feel a little bit shorter to some people. Perhaps it's feeling a little bit more snug. It doesn't really feel any different to me at all. I did find that to be a problem though between the Vaporfly Next Percent 1 and 2. 2 felt much more roomy in the toe box. Some people are going to love that, others not so much. Same amount of miles on my V1 here, and I'm noticing quite a lot of wear in the mid to forefoot area of the rubber. A tiny bit of wear on the lateral side of the heel here. That's where I typically see wear on pretty much all my shoes. That is not the case in the V2. I've got no wear here in the back portion of the shoe, and I can't see any wear whatsoever around the mid to forefoot area. The exposed midsole's taken a little bit of a pounding, but you would expect that, and I have the same thing on the V1 too. Another big thing I've noticed that people thought was a bit of an advantage, I suppose. They've kind of made these strips slightly longer here in the heel, but the one on the lateral side has actually been repositioned, and it doesn't cover quite so much of that exposed midsole as it does on the V1. On face value, it seems like it's a bit of an improvement, but actually when you look at the two shoes side by side, the V1 actually moves a little bit further back into that territory that we need to protect. I think the majority of runners are going to land probably on the lateral side of the heel and then transition onto the midfoot, so that could be a bit of a problem in terms of longevity. All in all, I think after about 64 miles or whatever it is I've got in the shoe so far, I think the changes between the V1 and the V2 are actually quite minor. A heavier, more stable version of the original. It's got the same DNA, but there is some different feel there underfoot. Certainly a thicker and less flexible upper. I think I actually prefer the upper in the first version. Slightly less aggressive feel underfoot from those AirPods and the addition of that Zoom X underneath them. I think all makes for changes that perhaps are going to appeal to a wider section of runners. But is it actually better than the V1? So far I found it a more usable shoe on a daily basis. I've certainly ploughed a load of miles into it. Doesn't feel quite as odd and weird to use it in a more daily frequent basis. I think the V1's still got something about it though, some magic there that the V2 doesn't quite have. What are your experiences in using the ALPHAFLY Next Percent 2 so far? Can you see Jakob Ingebrigtsen using this shoe to run a road 5k? Let's not forget back in May 2020 he actually used the original version of the ALPHAFLY to do just that. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. A quick musical interlude for you today. I always gravitate back to the simple blues sound of George Thorogood and the Destroyers. Some fantastic live videos of George Thorogood and the Destroyers playing all across Europe and America. Some of the 70s stuff is the very best though, and that's where today's album comes from. Literally the debut self-titled album, George Thorogood and the Destroyers, is the one to check out first off. Madison Blues and their version of Ride On Josephine, their fantastic Bo Diddley track, are absolute dynamite. It's very simple stuff here guys, drums, bass, bass and guitars, a few little guitar overdubs from time to time, but George Thorogood keeps it nice and simple and just lets the guitar sound come to the forefront. Madison Blues has got this wonderful shuffle to the drums, everything just sort of glues together. Sounds great as well, it just sounds as if it's a load of guys playing in a room. And their version of Ride On Josephine does the same thing really, keeping it nice and straight, nice and simple. You can really hear the essence of the track there, they kind of get it. I'm pretty sure that Bo Diddley played with George Thorogood at some point live on stage. I think he's got a lot of those old sort of blues and rock and roll players and brought them back to the forefront of people's minds. Go and check it out, guys, from the 70s, George Thorogood and the Destroyers with their album titled that. Thanks for tuning in, people, always appreciated. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and click the bell below for notifications when I launch the new videos for you. Hit us with a super thanks as well. Revenues on YouTube are very, very unpredictable, I suppose, and it really does help the channel out. It supports us bringing some new shoes in to review. Give this video a thumbs up, like, and share it with your running buddies. My name's EDDBUD, and I'll be seeing you